Why do we want to study statistics? That's a question.
We're all like, okay, wait.
Wisconsin, why do we want to study statistics?
To learn things.
What do we want to learn?
To try and figure out different ways to figure out different answers so we can have different probabilities and different outcomes.
Different probabilities and different outcomes. If you look in your textbook to chapter 1, and I point you to page 2 at the bottom, learning objective 1. You're going to see that we study statistics because why? They're everywhere. As I said, we use statistics in our everyday lives. We use them professionally. We use them when we might not even think we're using them. They're used in marketing, accounting, quality control, professional sports, hospital administrators, educators, politicians. I think I covered each and every one of your industries. Each and every one of your industries heavily rely on statistics. We're going to say that there are two types of statistics. The first we call descriptive statistics. Methods of organizing, summarizing, and presenting data in an informative way. So it is going to describe something. An example, miles of an interstate highway in the United States. If the interstate system represents only 1% of the nation's total roads but carries more than 20%, that is a statistic. Without using the word statistic, just giving you these numbers, what did I tell you?
Numbers. Told us how many miles it was on the interstate.
That 20% of the traffic's on 1% of the roads.
We use statistics to tell a story. I'll back up here a little bit, but remember, we use statistics to tell a story. It's up to the statistician to determine what story they want to tell. But when I use something like carries more than 20% of the traffic, that tells you how much of the traffic in the United States is being carried on interstate highways. My favorite example, and I'll pick on insurance companies.
Please.
How can Flow with Progressive come out and save you on average $400 over the nearest competitor, which is Geico? How can Geico and that little lizard, chameleon, whatever, how can he come out and still save Progressive customers over $400? Are they lying? Are they stretching the truth? Let's pick on the telephone companies. How can AT&T have the fastest network or the highest quality? But yet Verizon comes out and says they have the best system. Surely they're not fitted. Remember, when it comes to math, when it comes to statistics, your output is only as good as your inputs. neither company, I'm not going to accuse either company or either industry of fabricating a lie, but I will say they might be interesting to see where they're pulling their data from. So again, statistics is going to be the one that tells the story. It's the numbers that tell a story. We study statistics as a way of telling us something about the subject that we are interested in. In this case, traffic in our highway system. Inferential statistics. A decision, estimate, prediction, or generalization about a population based on a sample. Okay, so I'm going to introduce two concepts here. What do you think the population refers to?
Population is whatever you're studying, or whatever you're trying to get information on.
Give me an example.
Like, how many patients come in with COPD?
Okay, let's expand that and go wider.
How many patients use a certain hospital, or what percent of patients use a certain hospital?
Let's say how many patients entering the hospital enter based on respiratory problems or COPD. So my population is going to be everyone entering the hospital. Now, is it realistic to say that I could go out and pull every single person entering the hospital and pull them out?
No.
No. Another good example would be, the best example I always give is the census. How often do we do the census?
Every 4 years?
Every 10 years.
10.
Okay, so we take a census in this country every 10 years, and we pull a certain sample I'm going to shift here. I want to use the census as a So we're going to say United States citizens becomes the population. We're going to pull a sample of USA citizens, and we are going to ask them questions such as, how often do you eat out? How often do you watch TV? How often do you exercise? How often do you shop? How often do you engage in specific activities? Now, we do this as a way, from our sample, we're using the data that we pull from our sample to tell us something about the population. We will do this sampling throughout the 1 to 10 year period. We take the census every 10 years. The idea is that over the census, we are going to ask the population. If we want to know something about the population, why do we wait every 10 years to ask them?
So you're saying that we take a sample, so are we sampling on a year-to-year basis up through the 10 years?
Throughout the 10-year, I won't say on an annual basis, but throughout the 10 years, we'll sample.
Okay.
Every 10 years, we'll take a broad census. Think of how time-consuming it is to take a complete census.
Right.
Think of how long it takes. And we have the Census Bureau right here in our backyard. We staff up years before this.
Yeah.
We collect the data, we analyze the data, and that takes years after we receive it. So it's very lengthy. We also would take a sample because of time constraints, because of, we're just going to say, difficulty in obtaining the data. And in some cases, it's impossible to get the data. You know, if we wanted to study how many homeless people we have in America, it would be impossible to truly go out and identify every single individual who was homeless on our streets. However, we can go and take samples based off of geographical areas or even contacting local shelters. Ever how we would find that data, we got to find ways that we could obtain that data. And again, we want good, reliable data, but that would be an example of where it would be impossible to get that. All right, so we just said a population is a collection of all possible individuals, objectives, or measurements of interest. Wisconsin, you still seeing the board?
Yes.
All right. A sample is going to be a portion or part of the population. So remember, the population is what we have interest in. We just identified that we take a sample instead of studying every member because of prohibitive cost. I introduced time to you. One that I did not mention till now, destruction of item being studied. Who can give me an example of that?
Breakdown?
Give me an example of population, a population and a sample of a situation of where we sample the population because otherwise it would be destruction to the population.
Maybe a possible medical research.
Good job. Medical research. Items. You know, I always think of life. I always think of, I'll just say nature. So I will think of life, both human and other animals. Or I think of forest, oceans, sandy beaches. I mean, all of those come to mind. All right. Two types of variables. Qualitative and quantitative. All right, under qualitative, just know that I mean non-numeric. Gender, religion, affiliation, type of automobile owned, and eye color. Versus quantitative variable is information that is reported numerically. Examples include balance in your checking account, minutes remaining in class, who's tracking that? And the number of children in a family. Now, quantitative variables can be classified as either discrete or continuous. Discrete variables can only assume certain values, and usually there are gaps. So an example, the number of bedrooms in a house. There's going to be a minimum and a maximum here. That's your range. Continuous variables can assume any value within a specified range. Okay, the pressure in a tire. Okay, and the way I look at it, yes, you have a range, but it could be anywhere in between there. In my house example, you either have one bedroom or you have two. But with the tire pressure, you know, one all the way up to the maximum amount until the tire blows. Here's a good slide to reference later. And this is in your book on page 6. All right, so two types of variables that we introduced, qualitative and quantitative. Of the quantitative, they can either be discrete or continuous. Now, 4 levels of measurement: nominal, interval, ordinal, and ratio. Nominal data cannot be arranged in any particular order. An example, eye color, gender, or religious affiliation. Interval. It can be meaningful between the differences in data value. All right, think about that. Temperature on the Fahrenheit scale. Without even indicating climate or the way it feels. If I come in and say, this classroom here is 70 degrees, or this classroom over here is 99 degrees, which one would you want to come in and sit in?
70.
70. I don't even have to say, this is hot, this is the hot room, this is the cold room. Okay, that's interval data. You can distinguish where you want to be. Ordinal data is data that is arranged in some order, but the differences between the values cannot be determined or are meaningless. All right, during a taste test of 4 soft drinks, Mellow Yellow was ranked number 1, Sprite 2, 7-Up 3, and Crush number 4. Do we know how many people chose Mellow Yellow? Or do I know how much more meaningful was Mellow Yellow compared to Sprite? No, I just know that Mellow Yellow was preferred, but I don't know how much more it was preferred. You know, did it just barely escape? Or was there a huge difference between the two? Now, what makes ratio level? Here's an interval with an inherent 0 starting point. All right, if I say that let's see here. You get a 90% grade in this class without even giving you that grading scale. Well, it's 90% up from the bottom. Monthly income of surgeons. Okay, the least someone could make being 0. So if we showed you their reported incomes, again, we could relate it back to 0. So again, nominal can be classified and counted. No particular order. Ordinal. Classification is represented by a set of labels. Data can be ranked or ordered. Here we know severe in its relation to low. I was off just recently down at the beach, and if you know, they come out and put the flag out every night, or where I go, they put the flag out every morning. And I know yellow to red. Who knows what purple is? Don't get in the water.
Don't get in the water. Okay.
This means wildlife is present. Interval. Again, data classifications are ordered according to the amount and the characteristics that they possess. And ratio is going to have that relationship to 0. And the ratio level is the highest level of measurement up from 0. Now, the reason why we care and study levels of measurement is this is going to dictate the calculations that we want to perform or need to perform, and it's going to help determine what statistical test we need to order. So early on in the syllabus, remember, I introduced you to t-values and, as an example. Okay, how do I know that I would order up a t-test? What am I trying to show? So depending on what type of data I'm working with, what type of measurement I'm working with, and what type of measurement I want my output to come in is going to determine what test that I run. Again, chart 1-3 is a good summary of these 4 levels of measurement. Now, ethics and statistics. What comes to mind when I say Enron, WorldCom, Bernie Madoff?
Very unethical.
Yeah, unethical.
Unethical people, you were going to say people, cheaters. But exactly how were they cheating?
They were using statistics and populations of people.
They were taking data, in Enron's case, they were only taking data from those profitable businesses. WorldCom, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just report the good and bury the bad.
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff, he made off with money. But he reported inflated returns. So people were getting statements and they were only seeing inflated returns. No one questioned. So when we talk about ethics and statistics, okay, I highlight this for this reason. Remember, we use statistics to tell a story. What story are you trying to tell? If you only choose the good and pretty data, you are only going to output good and pretty measurements, results. But remember, we use statistics the reason we use it is to tell us something. Tell us that story of what we're interested in. Now, in business, I would want that story to be good and reliable. Business folks use statistics in order to make decisions. I would want to base that decision on fact, or at least good, reliable. We'll talk about that. We might not get it up to factual or 100%, but I want to get up to as close to 100% as I can. So it's up to the person doing statistical analysis. In this case, it's up to each one of you. Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Caitlin. It's up to you, and I'm picking on you because you are the one who said you want to become an actuary.
In my defense, I'm just starting right now.
I say this because you would be the one who would be charged with doing a lot of these studies on a postgraduate level. And again, always walk the high road. Always use good and reliable data. No one ever expects the number to always come out and be desirable. We run statistics to try to identify undesirable results as well as the good points. Okay, I think of a good example with NASA. How much testing do they do to satisfy and ensure a reliable launch of the space shuttle? But if there is anything that would put the lives of those astronauts, and we've had mishaps, yes, but if there's anything that would put the lives of those astronauts at a loss or cause death or pain, I would think that NASA would want to identify that as early on before they made the front page news, before they lived with ignoring. I'll give you an example of two companies in business who chose not to do this. I go back to the 1970s. Whoever has heard of a Ford Pinto?
I have. He's had one.
The Ford Pinto of the 1970s, and we're home to North American Truck Plant, a Ford motor here. So we have two Ford plants here. But in the 1970s, what was happening in the automotive industry? There was a threat coming from a certain region of the world. When you think of countries producing cars, who do you think of?
Tokyo, Japan,
What kind of cars y'all drive?
or Chevy,
Chevy,
Lexus.
Lexus. Where was your Lexus made?
I have no idea.
It's owned by Toyota
Toyota.
out of Japan. I don't know where it was made, but it's owned by Toyota Motor.
I have a Dodge.
Dodge, Nissan. Nissan Japanese. So 50% of the cars here are from Japan, and 2 are from the good old USA. I'm out of Germany. So back in the 1970s, we had this threat coming in from the Japanese auto market. What they were doing is they had already mass produced and were making these small, fuel-efficient cars. We were having rising fuel costs and even gas shortages here in the United States. So American automotive companies were scrambling to try to create some small, fuel-efficient car as a way to ward off international competition. Ford Motor comes out, their answer is the Ford Pinto. Now, one of the engineers got together and decided that in order to increase fuel efficiency, they would put the gasoline tank in the rear of the car. Now, what happened? That car Someone gets rear-ended and the car explodes. It happens again. Ford Motor kicks wind of it. Their actuaries get together and they work with the finance department and they say, what do we need to do here? Should we, finance says, what's our potential impact? The actuaries come back and say, oh, with our sampling, this is a small percentage, small sample out of our population of all cars that were released. It's just a small amount of those that would explode. And by the way, who's buying these small cars? Ladies, after I say this, you'll probably never buy another Ford. But it was the female driver. It was the stay-at-home mom. And if you don't figure this out, if you if you die in a wrongful death and your heirs or your estate comes back and sues the company, the amount of judgment is most often determined by what is your life worth. I'm glad my wife's not listening to this, but is a stay-at-home mom's life worth as much as the business executive? In that case, the male business executive. I'm going to say yes, dear. I'm going to say yes, dear. But that actuary said, no, the court would only award a smaller amount on this female stay-at-home mom's life. It would be more cost efficient if we didn't do a recall and we just wait and let them explode and we just pay off. Well, that's the decision they chose to do. Now, obviously, that actuary missed it, and the amount of cars that exploded far exceeded any type of prediction. The amount of out-of-pocket became very important. Once wind broke of this to the public, you can imagine the public view of Ford Motor. So not only a decline in business on top of monetary settlements, it pushed Ford Motor to the edge. Now chalk that up to just say a few years back in 2000 when the Explorer started tipping over with the Bridgestone tires. How did Ford handle that dispute? I can tell you, I was driving an Explorer at the time. They recalled every single Explorer. They started it within this couple-year range, and they expanded it all the way out to about 5 years. They took a huge write-down on tires. They fired Bridgestone as a partner that they had had for 100-plus years. And they, no questions asked, I was able to bring my Explorer back in and get 4 brand-new tires. I even asked to have a replacement underneath. I'm that driver who I never want a little dingo tire. I want a full replacement. They even gave me a full replacement. Okay, let's go back through the 70s. Now, through the 1980s, right off of this, who remembers what happened to Tylenol? News got back to Tylenol that someone had put cyanide in their aspirin, in their baby aspirin. What was Tylenol's response? They ordered an immediate withdrawal of every aspirin on every shelf across the United States. And without taking any chance, they scrapped every single aspirin that they had out for distribution. What do you think the view of Tylenol was after that? Did they need to? They identified, their actuaries said it's probably, again, a little small amount of the pills that are affected. They took the widespread, they pulled the entire population of pills out, of aspirin out, and scrapped it. The American sentiment after the Tylenol deal. All right, I was approximately 5 years old when that happened. If I call my mom up right now and say, what aspirin do you have in your house? And what aspirin did you buy throughout my entire life? She will not hesitate and say Tylenol. That built so much goodwill and so much credibility for Tylenol that it took an entire generation of mothers with it. Ford wrote off a generation of mothers. Tylenol gained. All right. So,
Charlie, are we supposed to be seeing a PowerPoint?
you were getting ready to. Give me 1 second.
Were you showing it before?
Yes.
Well, we didn't see any of it.
Well, the good thing about it,
We saw your wonderful faces.
well, here again, www.mhhe or check YouTube. I'll recap these for you real quick.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, we listened to it, so it was okay, but we just couldn't see them on our side.
Do you want me to reference the 3 or 4 that I said were most important?
No, because we can go back onto YouTube and watch it over.
Yeah, we're gonna do that.
And again, use them in your textbook. Those slides, I use the summary of levels of measurement as well as the description of variables. Those were 2 slides that I said from the text that were most. And
There we go.
this was the first slide.
Okay. And we found the other one on page 11, that levels of measurement.
All right, so chapter exercises. Which is your homework?
Number 16.
Number 16. All right, so 16, let's look at some of these. 16 is going to ask you, we're not going to do the homework in class, but so you can kind of get an idea. All right, so stereo equipment recently begins a no hassles return policy, a sample of 500. Customers recently returned items showed 400 throughout. The policy was fair. 32 thought too long, and the rest had no opinion. On the basis of this information, what can you infer about the data? No one speak out. But that is the homework for chapter 1.